I hope you got an idea, because we're fresh out.
A manned space mission where something goes majorly wrong on the approach to Mars, and on the surface, the survivors investigate a mystery. Gee, that sounds like a great idea for a movie. So great, in fact, let's just do 2 movies with that same premise in the same year.
Taking the first piss on Mars.
I mean, it could all just be a massive coincidence.
Let's go to Mars.
Mission to Mars and Red Planet.
That's when we find out whether we come all this way for nothing.
I don't know about you, but I generally love me some semi-realistic movies about space exploration and perhaps meeting some sort of alien life form. Since there are now so many of them, they all end up in pretty much the same way. Something majorly goes wrong, and it's only a question of how quickly it turns into either a Close Encounters of the Third Kind type of first contact situation with some alien force, or an alien type first and last contact situation. Here are 2 films that try to mix a lot of previous space exploration tropes to produce something different, yet neither really manages to feel wholly original or compelling.
It's about the math.
They're entertaining enough, but really nothing at all special or memorable. They were also released 8 months apart in the year 2000, leading to the idea that movie producers had run out of hit movies to copy and were now concentrating on mimicking their competitors' flops.
That's not going to change.
Uneventful space exploration doesn't necessarily make for an exciting movie. No, that is not a knock on 2001: A Space Odyssey. That is only a movie that feels like nothing happens. But again, 2001 is the quintessential movie about space exploration where something goes wrong. If you made a movie called Mission to Costco, you might think that the worst hardships faced by the main characters would be finding a parking space close to the entrance or pretending that you all lived at the same address.
It's worth a shot.
They say, in space, everything is trying to kill you. Well, I suppose the same is true with movies. Make a movie that isn't amazing, and everybody is trying to kill you.
All right, all this talking's burning up oxygen. Let's move out.
Mission to Mars was released in March of 2000 and was an attempt to make a space exploration gone wrong movie as a thought-provoking blockbuster. Now, those are 3 words that usually go together about as well as public speaking and agoraphobia.
God, who dreams up these nightmares?
A party to celebrate the launch of the first of 2 missions to Mars sets up the main characters. Luke and some ominously not famous people are going first, while married couple Woody and Terry are heading up the second mission along with young Phil. Another astronaut, Jim O'Connell, left the program after the death of his wife. I only mention this because the film considers these dynamics very important to the point where 90% of the film's first half hour very clunkily bludgeons you over the head with that information, where it feels like a recap of what happened on last week's episode of Dallas spread out over 30 minutes.
What?
The first mission to the Red Planet, of course, goes wrong, where the 3 less famous explorers are killed by a savage storm which reveals a giant face on the top of a Martian mountain. The second planned mission, led by Woody and Terry, is reformatted as a rescue mission, where they'll be joined by Jim.
The ship can take it.
Oh, ship can take it.
Just before reaching Mars, the ship is holed by a tiny meteoroid, leading to probably the film's best scenes as the crew try to repair the damage. However, it's not long before the ship's destroyed and they need to conduct a hazardous spacewalk to get to another ship orbiting Mars. Woody gets too far from the ship and heroically sacrifices himself so as to not endanger his wife or anyone else. It's certainly the film's saddest and most poignant scene. Still, you got to laugh, haven't you? Down on Mars, they meet up with the lone survivor, Luke, and soon find that a mysterious sound is actually a test where the answer is to complete the double helix, in probably the first time M&Ms proved so pivotal to the plot of a science fiction film. Candy MacGuffins in movies are not unheard of. Who can forget the scenes in the first draft of Casablanca where everybody's searching for the stolen letters of Toblerone? Inside the giant face, they find what amounts to a Martian version of a planetarium, where it's shown that it was the Martians who left the planet after a disaster, they'd spread out among the stars, and they'd helped kickstart life on Earth.
Where's that?
There's another massive storm brewing, threatening to derail their departure, but not before Jim decides to join the planetarium, which of course is a Martian ship, and he elects to pilot the Martian ship to wherever. Mission to Mars is relatively enjoyable, but it's an easy-to-forget space movie where, yes, the real monster ended up being misunderstanding. So what started as a space melodrama with the backdrop of a monster movie morphed into a techno-thriller before heading into more thoughtful territory in its last act. In theory, that's of course a very interesting mix. However, in the case of this movie, that doesn't really work out well enough when you have such simplistic characters that are rarely more than simple archetypes. Phil, Luke, and Terry have almost nothing in their past or defining character traits. Woody likes old rockets. That's it. And Jim's really the only character that you learn anything about, where Gary Sinise seems to be playing a slightly less gruff version of the same character he played in Apollo 13.
This is a ship.
While that film was based on real people, it also managed to turn them into interesting characters. Mission to Mars, inspired somewhat by an old Walt Disney World attraction, is not a film about remotely interesting characters. Maybe that's actually realistic because people with massive character flaws tended not to make it past psychiatric evaluations and go on official space missions.
It's Jimmy Connell. It's going to be nobody else could have put this off. Nobody else.
However, they're an awfully dull lot with about as much charisma as an ingrown hair in a really inaccessible spot.
The exact genetic composition of my ideal woman.
The most obvious exception to the dull spaceman rule, Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin, who formulated the very best reply to a conspiracy theorist's bullshit, a knuckle sandwich.
Yes. Yes.
Of course, movies are movies, and these characters are fairly dull, enlivened only because it's a solid, if not standout cast. Connie Nielsen, Don Cheadle, Jerry O'Connell, Tim Robbins, Gary Sinise, and an uncredited Armin Mullerstahl. Casting lesser actors in the same script would have made this pretty dull film duller by a power of 10, which would be quite dull. The effects in many scenes have held up fairly well, right up until the last reel when the 2000s era CG really does start to show its flaws. While the film had done a fairly good job of photorealism up to this point, the big ending strains the limits of the technology of the time. In the end, it's serviceable. Mission to Mars attempted to keep the technology relatively realistic, apart from it being set in a version of 2020 where silicon graphics computers were still a thing. The thing that the film does best is taking the prosaic aspects of space travel and doing that very well. The middle part of the film feels like it's been lifted from another, more enjoyable space movie. I think I'd really like to see the rest of that other movie. The scenes of the crew in a weightless environment are done very well, as are the scenes involving the tiny hole in the ship. It's aiming for believably accurate, yet tasteful, because nobody really wanted to see a PG movie about a zero-G diarrhea outbreak.
Come on, people, let's work the problem.
Production design and most of the cinematography is very well done. The film was shot in Vancouver, Jordan, and the Canary Islands, where the Martian landscapes look suitably alien.
He's right, Ray. We got a real shot here.
Ennio Morricone produced a serviceable musical score, but it's not among his most memorable or hummable work. I mean, there won't be too many people loading the film's main theme as their ringtone. The film's original director, Gore Verbinski, walked over his concerns with the film's effects resources. He was replaced late in the day by Brian De Palma, whose 1996 film version of Mission Impossible overcame a majorly confusing script to become a major franchise-launching hit. De Palma's mojo just wasn't enough to turn Mission to Mars into the sort of film that just hits at the right moment. It led to a film that cost $100 million and only took in slightly more than that at the box office. Now, that's when theatre owners and studios would call in the bomb squad. De Palma, who'd had massive success with films like Carrie and the Untouchables and many neo-noir thrillers, would not direct another movie on this scale. It's an okay film, but nothing worth going out of your way to see, unless of course you really just love space exploration gone wrong movies. The technical part of the film is done very well, but with some very generic and dull characters, it's really hard to recommend it unless you just want to see every space movie.
That should have been a warning.
Red Planet was released in November of 2000, and once again, things didn't go so well. On some levels, they really didn't go so well. It's 2025, and there's another mission to Mars. Earth is in the grip of a serious environmental crisis, and terraforming Mars is seen as the best option for humanity. Red Planet is a film that's designed to be loud and edgy, and it's certainly louder and edgier than Mission to Mars. We have darker spacesuits, ships designed to look cool rather than functional, loud music, and even louder characters, who are not always in the best of humour. Just think how frazzled your temper is after sitting for hours in a traffic jam, and then extrapolate that to having travelled millions of miles across space for nothing. We have Carrie-Ann Moss as the mission commander, Bowman, Val Kilmer as a smart-ass engineer, Gallagher, Tom Sizemore as smart-ass scientist, Birchinall, Simon Baker as a nervous scientist, Pettingill, Benjamin Bratt as the hard-ass military pilot, Lieutenant Santon, and Terence Stamp as a vaguely sedated head scientist, Chantillis. The trip is all about establishing the very simplistic character traits and relationships between them, and setting up some sexual tension between Bowman and Gallagher. As Earth had been preparing for Martian habitation by sending algae that would generate oxygen, scans have shown that all traces of that prep has disappeared. Ooh, there's a mystery. Of course, it's a space exploration movie, so something goes royally wrong just as they're within spitting distance of Mars. Some sort of energy flare fries the ship's electronic systems, and the crew abandon ship, with Bowman staying behind to effect repairs. On the surface of Mars, things haven't gone so well, as the downed crew are far from where they need to be, their habitation module, or HAB, which had been set up remotely before they arrived. Chantillis dies from his injuries, and the remaining crew bitch and grouse as they trek across the Red Planet. But things take a turn when they find their HAB has been destroyed. This, of course, sucks on so many levels, and not just because they'll soon die, but also because getting a prompt payout for an insurance claim on Mars is complicated by the fact that the insurance company insists on an on-site appraisal. However, there is actually now an atmosphere on Mars.
What the hell is going on here?
But their navigational robot, Amy, has been damaged and thinks it's in combat mode. Santon was killed semi-accidentally by Pettingill. You know, he fell, right?
Sure gets some high arc in this low gravity, huh?
After making contact with Bowman, they begin another trek to find an old Russian probe that can get at least two of them back into space. Pettingill is acting just a little too guiltily, while Birchnell is more interested in what happened to the algae and how they can actually breathe.
You hate not knowing, don't you?
Oh, give it time. Believe me, I'll know.
Turns out that the algae has been consumed by insects who produce oxygen, though the film definitely ignores what it implies, that the insects fart breathable air. Pettingill's found dead, full of insects, and they're in Birchnell suits as well, but in another heroic self-sacrifice, he turns himself into a bonfire. It all looks lost until Amy catches up with him. After a little battle, Gallagher will salvage its battery, then he'll take off from Mars to rendezvous with Bowman, where the new happy couple can get to know each other before, of course, spending the next 8 months of the return journey wiping down the cabin.
Fuck this planet.
While neither film is especially great, Red Planet does manage a few things better than Mission to Mars. It has a more charismatic cast playing interesting characters, though most of them end up being highly unlikable. They have an edge to them in that they listen to EDM and distill their own alcohol, but they're such overt characters that it is hard to believe they'd ever be trusted with such an important space mission.
What about me?
Carrie-Ann Moss spends most of the film on her own up in space, which is probably for the best when Tom Sizemore and Val Kilmer ended up having a falling out with each other to the point where it was nigh on impossible to have them on set at the same time. Look, I totally sympathise. I remember the time at the company picnic where I was forced into competing in a three-legged race with my backup office nemesis, Jed. We only came in second because in our office, everybody hates each other.
I may pick up a rock.
The film does try to tell a more interesting story, but it's mangled along the way by the constant need to have impressive action set pieces. The robot Amy has one story function in this movie, and that's just to go wrong and become this incredibly dangerous killer Ibo. The movie was released and the response was not what you would call positive. Reviews at the time were less kind than a text asking for a divorce. The film's $80 million budget, or apparently the equivalent of 8 Val Kilmers, yielded a box office take with a 3 on the front, and it wasn't a good 3. Now, that's a big ouch, an ouch on the level of getting your transplanted hair caught in the sunroof.
She's holding it together now, but she could fall apart at any moment.
While the direction of this film is decent enough, Red Planet would be director Anthony Hoffman's one and only feature film. Taken on its own, Red Planet has a smattering of interesting ideas in amongst the characters that seem to have been cut from Armageddon for being too smart. It perhaps tries to pull off way more than it could chew, but does make for a semi-entertaining night's viewing if you are desperate.
Call Earth, tell him it sucks.
Of the two movies we've talked about today, I can't really say which one is better, since being charitable, neither is really anything more than okay at best. I liked some of the ideas in both films, but in both cases, it's the execution that's severely lacking. So in comparing them to the greatest of all time Mars movie so far, The Martian,
Let's do the math.
Mission to Mars is 2.5 Matt Damons to Red Planet's 2 1/4 Matts. The Martian also seems to have taken some inspiration from Red Planet for one or two of its set pieces, but honestly I'd probably pop on The Martian for yet another rewatch before I ever thought about rewatching Mission to Mediocrity or The Red Ink Planet.
Oh, shit!
In summary, I do normally like films about space exploration gone wrong, but as it turns out, I don't care as much for space exploration films that go wrong. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
No, we don't have time.